Hey everybody, this is Todd with Industrial Comfort. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a wood frame like this so you can memorialize the artwork that you or the family make that you'd like to keep around the house. Complete with a hanger in the back, and I'll put all the items that you're going to need for this project in the description. So let's get started. So the materials that we're going to use for this project are pretty straightforward. I've got a couple pieces of scrap walnut in the shop. Wife asked for a dark wood, nice choice. And then I've got a piece of 1/4-inch plywood that I'm actually going to use for the backing so that this has a place to rest against the back of the frame. What I'm probably then going to do is create a channel using the table saw here so that we can nest the wire that's going to be used to hang the frame. Because it's so small, I don't want it sticking out from the wall too far. So the first thing I'm going to do is run this through the planer so that we get even dimensions for a starting point as we look to make the miter cuts for the frame. Now that I have the two pieces of wood that are going to serve as the outside of the frame planed down to the same size, I'm going to cut a channel or a rabbet along the side here so that I can nest this piece of 1/4-inch plywood within the frame and also elevate it forward so that I have space behind to put the screws, as I mentioned, to mount the wire so that it will sit flush against the wall. So what I've done is measure the midpoint in this piece of wood, which is 7/16, and I'm also going to be taking 1/8 of an inch out so that I can nest the piece of 1/4-inch plywood that I mentioned. And as I assemble this, it'll all make sense. But what I've done is I've set the saw to 7/16 of an inch in terms of the width that I'm going to cut. That way I'm going to get 1/8 inch off this. This is a 9/16 piece of wood. I'm also going to raise the blade by the same amount, 7/16, which purely coincidentally happens to be the midpoint in this piece of wood. So we'll get the cuts done and then we'll miter these and start putting things together. I'm ready to make the miter cuts in the frame material here, and what you have to remember is you have to add the thickness of the material to what you're encasing. So this is a 4-inch by 4-inch little painting. These are roughly a 1/2 inch thick, so I'm going to add 1 inch in extra material because there's going to be one on either side. So a 1/2 inch plus a 1/2 inch will give you 1 inch. And that will be added to the outside edge of each of the miter cuts. So the longest section of material should be 5 inches, and then the inner cuts that represent the miter will be that 4 inches to encase the little painting here. Okay, so as just mentioned, I'm going to measure out 5 inches. And this will be the new miter cut. Okay, I've put the frame pieces into these little miter jigs, And I'm going to glue them up 2 at a time. And I'm going to use a very small amount of glue because there's not a lot of surface area, and I'd prefer that the glue not kind of ooze out all over the place. So I've got a wet napkin on hand to wipe off any excess glue. All right, here's one. And we can also sand off any residual glue that gets on the outside when we're done. And there's 2. So we'll let this set up, and then when it dries, we'll go ahead and assemble the miter and glue it up. With the glue now set, I'm going to remove from this jig, and we'll assemble the frame and glue it back together. Now we'll let this set up and dry. Now that the glue has partially dried on the frame, I'm going to go ahead and cut a 4" by 4" square from this piece of 1/4" plywood that will then nest on the inside here, and then the painting will sit on top of that. The frame has had time to dry, so now I'm going to glue in the back here, and I'm just going to run a small bead along the edge. Hopefully you can see this. Just going to apply it so that it's even. And we'll drop it in. Now I'm going to also just run a small bead along the edge here. All the way around. Just like that. Now I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and I'm going to get a wet paper towel just to clean up the edges. Now, before we let this set up to dry, I just want to make sure that none has leaked onto the other side. It looks good. So now we'll just let this dry. Okay, the glue is, for the most part, dried, so I'm going to apply some walnut oil. And then once this dries, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll epoxy in, or I should say we'll use some caulking to put the painting into the frame. You'll notice there's a bunch of dry glue here. We're not really worried about that because that's going to be covered anyway. All right, we'll be back tomorrow to put in the painting. The walnut oils had time to set up, so I'm going to flip the frame over, and I have one of these picture hangers, and I decided that what I'm going to do is use some hot glue, and you can really use whatever you want. You can use epoxy, you can use wood glue, you can use hot glue like I'm using. There are a number of different things that you can do. I just think that this is going to be kind of the easiest thing to do for this project. So just going to apply some hot glue there and there on the screw hole. And then once that sets, we'll flip it over and we'll glue in the painting. Now I'm going to use some caulking. I tend to really love this PhenoSeal stuff. You can use glue, you can use epoxy, you can really use whatever you want. I don't know, for some reason I just love to use this caulking. It's very viscous and it will create sort of a nice cushion for the little painting to rest on, and it will easily fill up the gaps. So I'll just put 4 dabs of it down, and then I'll put the painting in place, and I'll kind of just orient it a little bit because the frame is ever so slightly larger, so I just want to make sure it's centered, and we'll let this sit to dry. And here's our finished walnut frame. Apparently I'm the one in the center there. Now, a couple times in the video, I mentioned that I was going to be using a wire in the back. Based on this particular project, I decided that using a little metal hanger like that was the most appropriate thing and the easiest to do. Now, you can use the same process and technique for any size frame that you want to use to memorialize art that you or the family make. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.